to accumulation of fluid in the follicle, and the rupture of this cyst may produce sterile peritonitis with pain in young female. Where copper luteal cyst is the most common ovarian mass in pregnancy. When in pregnancy, the corpus luteum enlarges and sometimes it accumulates fluid, and that becomes a corpus luteal cyst. So this can present as a mass in pregnancy. This cyst type of cyst is lined by luteinized cells. Now, if you look at the normal development of a Graafian follicle, you have the primary ovum here. This develops into a primary follicle, and then this develops into a Graafian follicle. This one is a mature Graafian follicle. If this fails to rupture, it can accumulate fluid and it can then have become a follicular cyst. But normally what happens is when it is mature, it ruptures and releases the ovum out at the 14th day of the cycle. So this part of the cycle is making the Graafian follicle, which is lined by granulosa type cells, which are producing estrogen. So that is why in the first half of the cycle, you have the estrogen, which is being produced. Once the ovum ruptures and is released out of the ovary, this Graafian follicle develops into a corpus luteum. This then starts secreting progesterone, which then leads to the second half of the secretory phase of the cycle. This is the early corpus luteum. This is a mature corpus luteum. And once the cycle ends, this corpus luteum becomes fibrosed and develops into a corpora albicans. So this is what happens in a normal cycle. So if this, at this point, it doesn't rupture, it develops into a Graafian follicular cyst. And then you end up having this kind of clear fluid filled cyst, which is just an unruptured Graafian follicle. This is the normal ovary on this side, and this side of the ovary is showing the follicular cyst. This is a corpus luteal cyst. Why do I say that? Because it is lined lined by luteinized cells, which are yellow in color because of the fatty deposition. And grossly, it looks like yellow in color. So even on gross examination, you can tell that this is a corpus luteum because it is filled with fluid and there is a cyst. This is a corpus luteal cyst. So these are the two most common non-neoplastic cysts of the ovary. And just a brief touch on the polycystic ovarian disease, which we had already discussed in your, I think, reproductive module 1. This is a disease which has numerous follicular cysts or ruptured Graafian follicles. This was previously called as Steen-Leventhal syndrome, and it is now either called polycystic ovarian disease or polycystic ovarian syndrome. It affects about 3 to 6% of females in reproductive age. And there are numerous cystic follicles of follicular cysts, which will make the ovary enlarged and double in size. But they're all non-neoplastic cysts, so they're all follicular cysts. And this, because of unruptured follicular cyst and no ovulation, the symptoms and signs are because of all these problems. And what happens in PCOD is that there is increased pituitary synthesis of luteinizing hormone and decreased synthesis of follicular stimulating hormone. So follicular stimulating hormone, because it is decreased, so follicles do not mature and they increase in size and they then become follicular cysts. The increased LH on the other side causes androgen synthesis, and androgen synthesis will lead to hirsutism, that is male-like characteristics. Androgens formed here are then aromatized to estrogen in adipose tissues, which will cause increase in estrogen levels and risk for endometrial hyperplasia and endometrial carcinoma. Increased estrogen will also have a negative feedback on FSH or follicular stimulating hormone and leads to follicular degeneration, accumulation of fluids, and multiple cysts in the ovaries. So this is what happens in PCOD, and the multiple cysts that you see in the ovary in PCOD are all follicular cysts. Clinically, these present with menstrual irregularities, typically oligomenorrhea or even amenorrhea. There is hirsutism, that is male-like features, there is infertility, and there is obesity. So they may present with any of these clinical findings. In the lab findings, the LH-FSH ratio is above 2. That is, LH is increased to more than 2 times FSH. Normal is 1:1. So because the LH is raised, the ratio becomes 2:1. There's also increased testosterone and androstenedione, that is male hormones, and also increased estrogen levels. But this is the characteristic test to determine polycystic ovarian disease, apart from the fact that you can see multiple cysts in the ovaries in ultrasound. And this is how it will look like. This is a normal ovary with a few small cystic areas. This ovary has multiple follicular cysts and is enlarged in size. So polycystic ovarian disease characterized by the clinical features as well as multicystic ovary on ultrasound. But this multicystic ovary is non-neoplastic. Okay, so this is what happens in polycystic ovarian syndrome. There is hyperandrogenism, which can lead to acne, hirsutism, male pattern of hair loss, elevated serum androgens. There is multiple polycystic ovaries on ultrasound. There are menstrual irregularities, oligomenorrhea and amenorrhea, and it's also associated with obesity and insulin resistance. We won't talk about the treatment option, which requires mainly healthy eating and other forms of treatment. And this is how they may present clinically: obesity, acne, hair loss, thinning of scalp hair, but hair on the face and chest, and cysts in the ovaries, infertility, missed periods, so on and so forth. So this is typically PCOD or PCOS. One small other thing that can enlarge the ovary is stromal hypertrichosis. This is typically seen in elderly and postmenopausal females, where there is cortical stromal hyperplasia leading to ovarian enlargement, which is usually bilateral. And microscopically, it shows hypercellular stroma with the luteinization of stromal cells and production of androgens, which can lead to hirsutism and virilization. So you see a lot of times in old postmenopausal females, you may see hair growing on the face and on the chin, and this is because of the stromal hypertrichosis producing androgens and producing hirsutism. So it is seen in postmenopausal females, but may be associated with PCOD in younger females. Okay, this is hirsutism, facial hair because of androgens in either PCOD or in stromal hypertrichosis. Oophorytis is the inflammation of ovary or inflammation of the fallopian tubes, and mainly it can be due to complication of mumps or involvement of pelvic inflammatory disease from the infections from the cervix and from the vagina. We won't go into that details, but this is how the an inflamed fallopian tube may look like. Coming to the main topic of today, I just talked about a few things that can infect the ovaries or come into the differential diagnosis of ovarian tumors, which can be infections, which can be polycystic ovaries, which can be follicular cysts, and which can be corpus luteal cysts. So coming to the main topic of today are the ovarian tumors. Now, basically, ovarian tumors are divided into 4 categories. Surface epithelial tumors, the most important of all of them, sex cord stromal tumors, germ cell tumors, and then metastatic tumors to the ovaries. So today we will just talk about the surface epithelial tumors, which are the most common and the most important ovarian tumors. If you look at the classification of ovarian tumors, again, these are the 4 types: surface epithelial cells, the surface epithelial tumors, germ cell, sex cord stromal tumors, and metastases. If you look at the overall frequency, surface epithelial tumors account for about 65 to 70% of all ovarian tumors. Germ cell, 15 to 20%, sex cord, 5 to 10%, and metastases, the least 5%. So the most common ovarian tumors are the surface epithelial tumors. Now, these are also the most common malignant tumors. The proportion of malignant tumors, 90% are surface epithelial tumors. Only 3 to 5% are germ cell tumors, 2 to 3% are sex cord tumors, and obviously all the 5% will be metastatic tumors, will be malignant. Age group is also important. These can occur from any age above 20 years to elderly females. Germ cell tumors typically seen in younger females, 0 to 25 years of age. Sex cord stromal tumors can also be seen in all ages, and metastases will have variable age. So always remember, a young female, she's in her teens or in her, even less than 10 years, most common ovarian tumor will be a germ cell tumor. In the elderly, over 20 years, over 40 years, the most common ovarian tumor will be surface epithelial tumor. Now, the surface epithelium tumors are of all these types. We will talk about these today. Germ cell tumors are these types: teratoma, dysgerminoma, endometrial sinus tumor, choriocarcinoma. These are the sex cord tumors. These two we will discuss tomorrow along with the metastatic. Today we are going to discuss the various types of surface epithelial tumors, which are the most common and the most important malignant tumors of the ovaries. Now, epithelial or surface epithelial tumors account for 3% of all cancers in female. I think this figure may not be right. It's probably more than that. It's fifth most common cause of cancer death in females. Why is it has such a big mortality? Because ovaries are hidden in the pelvis, and any small enlargement of the ovary is not detected. If there is tumor in the endometrium, it will lead to bleeding per vagina, abnormal bleeding. But in an ovarian enlargement, it basically goes undetected for a long period of time until it becomes so large that it can be palpated or it metastasizes in the peritoneum. So that is the reason why it has a high morbidity and mortality, because it is detected much later in the much later stage of the disease. The important thing about the epithelial tumors is that 80% are benign. Not all epithelial tumors are malignant. Most likely they are benign, and typically those in the younger age group are all benign. Malignant tumors typically occur. Hello. Ji. Sorry. Okay, so 80% of these are benign, and they're seen in the younger age group, and the malignant tumors are seen in the older age group, which is between 40 to 65 years of age. What are the risk factors? The most important risk factor in ovarian tumors are the genetic mutations. You've heard about BRCA1 and BRCA2 in breast cancer. This again is very important in ovarian cancer. 20 to 60% chances of females with either BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutations have a chance of developing ovarian cancer by 70 years of age. So if along with breast cancer, they can also develop cancer. P53 mutations are typically seen in high-grade serous tumors, KRAS mutations in mucinous tumors and in low-grade serous tumors, and PTEN mutation is seen in endometrioid tumors. Those high-grade serous tumors, P53 mutation, mucinous and low-grade KRAS mutation, PTEN mutation in endometrioid tumors that we will also discuss in the endometrial carcinomas. And BRCA mutations, very important genetic mutation for ovarian cancers. Other risk factors will include nulliparity. There is increased risk of ovarian tumors in unmarried females or married women with low parity. Family history will increase the risk. If there is a family history in the first degree relative, then there is a higher chance of developing ovarian cancer in the offspring. Oral contraceptives and tubal ligation will decrease the risk, and smoking also increases the risk. So, but the most important risk factor are the genetic mutations. Okay, coming to the surface epithelial or epithelial tumors, these, as we said, these are the most common type of ovarian tumors, and they account for about 65 to 70% of all ovarian tumors. They also account for the most malignant ovarian tumors. So not only they are the most common benign tumors, but they're also the most common malignant tumors. The types of surface epithelial tumors are all these: serous, most important, most common; mucinous, endometrioid, clear cell, Brenner tumor, and cyst adenofibroma. So these are 6 types of surface epithelial tumors, and we will discuss each one of them in detail separately because they're the most important ovarian tumors. Now, epithelial tumors can either be type 1 or type 2. They can either be low-grade tumors, we're talking about the malignant tumors, and or there can be high-grade tumors. The low-grade tumors arise from borderline tumors, and there is a cyst adenoma leading to a borderline tumor and then developing into a carcinoma, which would be a low-grade carcinoma. Whereas the high-grade tumors develop not from the cyst adenoma or borderline tumors, but from by P53 mutation. This mutation occurs in the serous, in the form of serous intraepithelial carcinoma, which is also called STIC, in the fallopian tubes or in the inclusion cyst in the ovary. So what happens that either the fallopian tube lining has a P53 mutation and develops an intraepithelial carcinoma, and then these carcinoma cells will then shed and get incorporated in the ovary, on the surface of the ovary, or and they develop a serous high-grade carcinoma of the ovary. They're not arising from the serous cyst adenoma, they're arising from the P53 mutation of either the fallopian tube lining or the inclusion cyst in the ovary. And these tumors are typically associated with BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutations. We'll discuss this in a little more detail. Sorry, this is... Why is it moving? Okay, so low-grade and high-grade tumors, type 1 and type 2 tumors. Low-grade tumors will arise from either benign serous cyst adenoma or a focus of endometriosis, and this then proliferates and develops into a borderline tumor or a tumor with borderline malignant potential. And then this develops into a carcinoma, which is a low-grade serous endometrioid or mucinous carcinoma. So it is all these 3 types of carcinomas, the low-grade types, will develop from in this pathway. High-grade serous, on the other hand, develops from P53 mutation, which leads to serous tubular intraepithelial carcinoma, which is the fallopian tube lining develops into a carcinoma by P53 mutation. These cells then shed down and then are either incorporated in an inclusion cyst of the ovary and then develop into a high-grade serous carcinoma. They don't develop from this pathway. They develop from P53 mutation leading to STIC and then high-grade tumors directly. Sorry. Okay, coming to the serous tumors. They're the most common group of benign and malignant tumors, about 30 to 50% of all ovarian tumors. And they're also the most common bilateral tumors. So the serous tumors are the most important ones. They're the most common ones. They're both benign forms and malignant forms. And they have most common bilateral tumors that they can involve both the ovaries. The lining epithelium is cuboidal to columnar ciliated epithelium. And most of these tumors, the serous, mucinous, and the endometrioid, have 3 types. The benign type, which is serous cyst adenoma, the borderline type, which is serous tumor of borderline malignant potential, and then the serous cyst adenocarcinoma, which is a malignant form, which can either be low grade, which is developing from this pathway, or high grade, which is developing directly from P53 mutation. This is a low grade, this is a serous cyst adenoma, which is lined by stratified cuboidal to columnar ciliated epithelial cells, which is lining the cyst cavity. It then begins to proliferate and it can become a borderline cyst of borderline tumor, serous cyst tumor of borderline malignant potential or borderline serous tumor, which begins to show papillary projections, which begins to show nuclear atypia, which begins to show mitosis, but then there is no invasion in the underlying stroma. As long as there is no invasion and they have epithelial changes in the form of stratification, papillary projections, nuclear atypia, mitosis, they are borderline, categorized as borderline tumors. Again, more proliferating borderline tumors, but no invasion in the underlying stroma. Once you begin to see invasion in the underlying stroma, this becomes a malignant tumor or serous cyst adenocarcinoma. And depending on how high the grade is, it is either low grade or it is high grade. So benign tumors, lining epithelium of simple cuboidal or to columnar epithelium without any atypia, without any mitosis, without any papillary projections. Borderline tumors, epithelial changes in the form of papillary projections, nuclear atypia, mitosis, but no invasion. And malignant tumors, once they start invading, they becomes the serous cyst adenocarcinoma. Mucinous tumors are large multiloculated tumors. They are the next common after serous tumors, about 20 to 25%. They're lined by mucus secreting cells similar to the endocervical epithelium. So they are the cells which have apical mucin. And once they metastasize into the peritoneal cavity, they produce a condition called pseudomyxoma peritoni, which is a jelly-like material in the entire peritoneal cavity. Again, the types of mucinous tumors are the three types: mucinous cyst adenoma, which is the benign form; mucinous tumor of borderline malignant potential, which is the borderline tumor; and mucinous cyst adenocarcinoma, which is the malignant tumor. And the same criteria will apply if the lining is typically benign, without any atypia, without any mitosis. It's a cyst adenoma. Once the lining becomes complicated, it's stratified, it shows atypia, it shows mitosis, it shows crowding and papillary projection, it becomes tumor of borderline malignant potential. And once it starts invading the underlying stroma, it becomes a mucinous cyst adenocarcinoma. Multiloculated, typically multiloculated mucinous tumors filled with mucus or jelly-like material. And this is the lining epithelium, which is like endocervix, the apical mucin, but benign, single layer, without any stratification, without any atypia. This is a benign mucinous epithelium, mucinous cyst adenoma. And this is showing surface epithelial proliferation, papillary projection, stratification, nuclear atypia, their mitosis. So if it was only this, it would have been a borderline tumor, but since there is mucinous secretions and tumor cells in the stroma, this becomes a mucinous cyst adenocarcinoma. And this is pseudomyxoma peritoni. This is the peritoneal cavity, which is filled with this jelly-like mucinous material clumped together and encasing all the bowel loops. And this is a typical feature of a metastatic mucinous tumor of either ovary, of appendix, or typically of ovary and appendix. So pseudomyxoma peritoni is a complication or a stage 3 ovarian mucinous tumor, which is filling the mucinous material is filling the entire peritoneal cavity. The third type, the endometrioid tumor, is a similar tumor that you would see in the endometrium, in the uterus. They can also be benign and borderline endometrioid tumors, but these forms are very rare. And the malignant endometrioid tumors of the ovary are more common, and they account for about 10 to 15% of all ovarian cancers. Because they resemble the endometrial type tumors, and they can also be associated with it. So you can have a separate tumor in the ovary and a separate tumor in the uterus, both of endometrioid type. In about 15 to 30% of the cases, there may be association along with in the uterus as well as in the ovary. 15 to 20% coexist with endometriosis. So this shows that this may be the risk factor for development of endometrioid tumors of the ovary. So origin can be from the endometriotic foci. So this endometriotic focus is like a benign cyst, and that leads to a borderline tumor and then a malignant tumor. Or it can directly arise from the coelomic epithelium by PTEN tumor suppressor gene mutation. So PTEN tumor gene mutation is important in endometrioid tumors, both for the ovary as well as in the endometrium, and we will discuss the endometrial tumors. Or they can develop from endometriotic foci in the ovary. This is how it looks like, typically like the endometrial glands, pseudostratified lining, compact, and back-to-back pattern. This is the typical endometrioid tumor that you would see in the ovary, and similar appearance we will see in the endometrium once we come to that. Brenner or transitional cell tumor. So remember, Brenner is the one which has transitional type lining. So it's also called transitional cell tumor. This is usually benign, and it may be seen with mucinous cyst adenoma or teratomas, may be associated with these two tumors, or and it can be either solid or cystic. Morphology, it has an ovarian-like fibrostroma and with nests of transitional type of epithelium. And most of these tumors, a majority of tumors are benign, only rarely are they malignant. They can be grade 1 tumors, the benign ones, or they can be grade 2 tumors, slight borderline type tumors, or they can be definite malignant tumors, the same type, 3 types. But most of these tumors are benign. Very rarely are they malignant. This is how they look like. There is ovarian stroma, and then these are nests of transitional type of epithelium. This stratified epithelium in the form of nests, and this is how it looks like on gross examination. But mostly benign Brenner or transitional cell tumors, which has 2 components, the transitional epithelium and the ovarian type stroma. Okay, if we look at all the malignant epithelial tumors, the most important or the most common ones are the serous ones. See, if the tumor is malignant, the likelihood of it being serous is 50%. The next common malignant epithelial tumors is endometrioid. Remember that most common of all benign and malignant tumors was serous, and after that was mucinous, including the benign ones. But if you just look at the malignant tumors, the most common ones are the serous, followed by endometrioid, and the mucinous malignant tumors are on number 3. Undifferentiated, sorry, I will come under 4 because undifferentiated tumors are 10%. So endometrioid के बाद 10% undifferentiated tumors होते हैं, and then there can be clear cell tumor, which are like type of endometrioid carcinomas, and which are high grade tumors again, and then mucinous tumors, and then metastatic tumors, which were 5%. We had already discussed that. So most important, most common malignant and benign tumor are the serous tumors. Second most common benign and malignant tumors are mucinous tumors, but second most common malignant tumors are endometrioid tumors. Sorry, got stuck again. Okay, this is the last slide for today, and this is the last tumor of this group of the epithelial surface epithelial tumors. Cyst adenofibroma. That is a cyst which is lined by a lining epithelium, and it has a fibroma component that is a pronounced fibrostroma. So these are variants of epithelial tumors with more pronounced fibrostroma. It can be either mucinous cyst adenofibroma, it can be serous cyst adenofibroma, or it can be endometrioid cyst adenofibroma, or it can be transitional cyst adenofibroma. They are all benign tumors, but with a pronounced fibrostroma. And depending on the lining epithelium, they are named according to that: serous, mucinous, endometrioid, or transitional. Okay, I think this was the last slide. I will then now ask you for any questions that you may have. Okay, are there any questions? No questions? What is this? Everything is clear? Okay. Sorry, yes. can't hear you. Is there a question? Yes, can I hear you? Is there a question? Anyone say something? Can anyone say something so that I know I can hear you? Is everything clear? Is there any question? Come on, you can ask me anything that you want to. I can't even see you. We only talked about the surface epithelial tumor today, and when we will discuss the germ cell tumors, the sex cord stromal tumors, and the metastatic tumors of the ovary in the next lecture. But since the surface epithelial tumors are the most important and the most common tumors, so that I discuss them in detail today. So which is the most common bilateral tumor of the ovary? Anybody?
Yes.
Come on, raise your hand and tell me. Yes. Which one? Did you say serous?
Yes.
Yes, yes, that's right. Okay, and which is the most common ovarian surface epithelial tumor?
Yes.
Yes, which one?
Serous?
Serous. Yes, serous again, serous. And the next most common surface epithelial tumor serous is?
Endometrioid.
Oh, that is the malignant one.
Mucinous.
The benign. Mucinous. Yes. So we have serous, we have mucinous, we have endometrioid, we have Brenner, we have cystadenofibromatosis, and we also have clear cell tumors, which are high grade tumors. Okay, serous being the most common, both benign and malignant, and bilateral. Mucinous the next most common, but the next most common malignant one is endometrioid. And what is the difference between a borderline tumor and a malignant tumor? What is the most important thing that distinguishes between a borderline and a malignant?
Stromal invasion.
Stromal invasion, right, absolutely right. And the difference between a benign and a borderline tumor? I can't hear you, say it again.
Papillary projections.
Papillary projection, nuclear atypia, mitosis, stratification, all these things. Okay? Crowding, single lining aa rahi hai, so then it's a benign tumor without any atypia, mitosis. Form of stratification of papillary projections and nuclear atypia, but without invasion, it becomes a borderline tumor. Most of these surface epithelial tumors are cystic. That is why it is important to understand the non-neoplastic cyst as well, because the tumors can be neoplastic, but mostly cystic in the ovary, either neoplastic or non-neoplastic. So the non-neoplastic cyst will be follicular cyst and corpus luteal cyst, and another cyst which I did not mention, that is endometriotic cyst. Okay, so they can also present with a big cyst, which is just an endometriotic cyst and not a tumor. and they can either be serous cystic tumors, they can be mucinous cystic tumors, they can be endometrioid cystic tumors, they can be Brenner tumor, which can be cystic, they can be cystadenofibroma, which can be cystic. Okay, so the more solid the tumor, the likelihood of it being malignant becomes greater. But a lot of these tumors present as cystic masses with some areas of solid component. Okay. Any other question? We still have another 5 minutes if there are any questions. Okay, I'm going to upload my presentation on Edmodo in about an hour's time, in 1 hour time, followed by a few MCQs that you will have to attempt after going through it again. And I will mark your attendance once you've gone through the BCQs and mark them. Okay.